The Honourable Craig Murray joins me now on the line on the subject of Julian Assange. Craig, as always, a warm welcome. I suppose it was to be expected that Priti Patel would decide as she did. What happens next?
Yeah, I think it would have been an astonishing shock if Priti Patel had suddenly exhibited any interest in freedom of speech or any other kind of freedom. What happens next is we now get to appeal to the High Court on all the major issues. What happened previously, of course, was in the Magistrates' Court. The magistrate ruled against extradition on health grounds and on grounds of the petitions in American prisons. And the High Court heard an appeal by the United States against her ruling, and the High Court ruled in favor of the United States. But that High Court hearing was therefore only on health and prison conditions. Now, what happens is that Julian gets to appeal on all the other issues, which are the major issues, on freedom of speech, on the freedom of journalists to publish, and on the bar on political extradition in the UK-US extradition treaty. So now we get to take all those issues to the High Court.
Can we take the last of those first, mainly because I was myself involved in it as a Member of Parliament at the time. I was given an assurance by the then Home Secretary David Blunkett that a case like Julian Assange's, which was a mere hypothesis of mine at the time, would not lead to extradition. He said on the face of this bill, on the face of this treaty, it precludes extraditing people for political offences. I must confess I was so naive, I went away largely satisfied by him. Yet I now discover that the claim is that there is no such disbarment. Enlighten us.
Well, the disbarment definitely exists. I mean, Article 4 of the treaty says very plainly there can be no political extradition. But what the magistrate ruled, and what is very important in other contexts of what is happening here, is that a treaty has no binding force, and that in effect international law does not have any force in the United Kingdom unless it's incorporated into domestic legislation. And as the Extradition Act of 2003 does not include a bar on political extradition, therefore the bar in the treaty itself has no force. This is quite astonishing because the treaty itself is the treaty under the terms of which the extradition is taking place. So to say that the terms of that treaty has no force, of course, makes no sense. But it's a line being taken in general by the UK courts. So far, the High Court's ruling has been that, for example, it doesn't matter what it says in the Refugee Convention. But according to the Refugee Convention, it would be illegal to deport refugees to Rwanda, but that is not incorporated in UK law. So no matter what treaty we've signed, the UK is not bound by anything it has signed. This is a very strange argument from a kind of imperialist exceptionalism, and why anybody should trust the UK in any international deal when the courts are ruling that no international deal the UK has signed up to has any effect in UK law is extraordinary to me. But that is the argument.
Turning to the press freedom issue, your friend and mine, Kit Clarenberg, poses the questions very brilliantly today. If Julian Assange has committed a crime worthy of this extradition and the potential 175 years in jail, why not The Guardian and The New York Times and the other major news houses, media houses that published the dripping roast of Julian Assange's revelations.
No, that is exactly right. This is an astonishingly selective prosecution, because many, in fact, all really of the major mainstream media published the revelations by Chelsea Manning for which Julian Assange is being prosecuted. And Julian Assange, of course, wasn't the leaker. He was merely a journalist and publisher. And this is a terrible precedent. Of course, the argument is that this is a terrible precedent and a threat to all journalists. And that we should remember, of course, Julian Assange was nowhere near the United States when he published. And Julian Assange is not an American citizen. This is somebody with no connection to the United States, publishing outside of the United States. So if this goes ahead, no journalist anywhere is safe potentially from American prosecution. But the truth of the matter is also, of course, that this is very, very selective prosecution. And this is the United States going after somebody it considers an enemy, whereas it's never, in fact, in current circumstances, going to go after the editor of the New York Times or the Washington Post, or outfits which, generally speaking, happily toe the neoliberal line. And of course, which do so now much more consistently than they perhaps did back at the time when these revelations were published more than 10 years ago.
Well, it's an interesting fact revealed, to me at least, by Kit Clarenberg's piece this morning, that in fact The Guardian published these revelations before Julian Assange and WikiLeaks did, because WikiLeaks, through the night, were busily redacting names of people in the documents so that they would not personally be endangered by the revelations. And so the Guardian actually published this material first. And yet not only are they not facing prosecution, some of the people in the Guardian have done their very best to so destroy Julian Assange and his credibility and standing amongst their readers that they actually played a part in where we are today.
Yeah, that is undoubtedly true. And it was a big problem for WikiLeaks that when they were trying to go through the vast quantity of material revealed by Chelsea Manning, which required them to have other partners assist them in doing it because just of the sheer amount of vetting that had to be done. The Guardian in particular were relentlessly pushing them not to be so cautious and to get on, because the Guardian wanted the scoop, and the Guardian wanted the scoop in order to make money. I mean, it shouldn't be forgotten, WikiLeaks doesn't make money out of this. The Guardian does. The Guardian was doing it purely with financial motives and seeing this as a great newspaper selling story. And it was, of course, the release of the unredacted material came when two Guardian journalists, David Lee and Luke Harding, published the password to crack the unredacted material in a book as a joke. As a joke, they made the password to crack the unredacted material the chapter heading of a book. They thought that was jolly amusing in their kind of schoolboy japes manner, and claimed to have been shocked that anybody worked out that that chapter heading was the password. So the Guardian's very culpable in this. The Guardian, of course, nowadays is a very reliable mouthpiece for the security services, as we see again today with its sister paper, The Observer, printing a quite ludicrous further attack on people who query the official narrative in Syria. And sadly, the sheer amount of hypocrisy surrounding the Assange case is one of the dreadful things about it.
Now, what about the fact that you and me, and much more importantly, Julian's lawyers, were being spied upon illegally in the Ecuador embassy, and this has given rise to a criminal case in Madrid, to which you at least will be giving evidence. You were unable to do so earlier, but are now free to do so. Tell us what might come out of that, and will that come up in the appeal?
It certainly will come up in the appeal. It was dismissed effectively as irrelevant by the magistrate, who didn't seem to think that the fact that the country requesting extradition was spying on Julian, spying on his lawyers, and seeking to kidnap and murder him should be a relevant factor in extraditing him to the very people doing that. That will again be tested in the High Court. It is astonishing to me, as you quite rightly said, in any other case, if one side of the case is spying on the lawyers and the legal papers of the other side, the case would be chucked out by any judge, pretty well any jurisdiction in the entire world. That hasn't happened in this case is gobsmacking. It's amazing. And remember, it's not only the case of that spying in the embassy. They also were following the lawyers. They were burgling the lawyers' offices. And on top of which, when Julian was eventually removed from the Ecuadorian embassy, his papers were taken to Quito by the Ecuadorians. So all his legal papers, all his legal documents were handed over to the CIA, as was admitted in court in his extradition hearing. So not only did they spy on all his legal conferences, they have all his legal papers. And for one side of a case to have all the legal papers of the other side of the case, it's simply unprecedented. It is just unbelievable that has not stopped the case.
So, of course, the appeal will grind exceeding slow, but that means that Julian will continue to die a little every day in Belmarsh prison, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we're extremely worried about his health. And there has been a very, very plain deterioration, both physically and mentally. And there comes a point where you worry about whether, on his release, whether that is reversible or not. Keeping him in effectively close to solitary confinement in circumstances in precisely the same regime as the most dangerous convicted terrorists in the country, when he's just a journalist and publisher, is something which, again, is indefensible. There is no need for it whatsoever.
Quite so. And finally, the new Australian government, Craig, have we any reason to be optimistic that they will take a more proactive role?
Well, I mean, they are generally less objectionable than the last Australian government, but at the moment, there's no sign of there being any less a US puppet. But I think the public opinion among the supporters of the new Australian government is quite firmly in favour of Julian. So let's hope we can work something through in that way.
Honourable Craig Murray, thanks as always for joining us on the mother of all talk shows. Craig Murray, former British ambassador to Uzbekistan.